Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. Global power shifts are on full display as leaders gather in Tianjin for the biggest Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in history. President Erdoğan is marking Turkey's active engagement, while Putin and Xi Jinping deepen their strategic partnership amid Western sanctions. The summit is also wrestling with fresh crises, from Israel's strike that killed Yemen's Houthi prime minister to escalating civilian deaths in Gaza, with India and Pakistan clashing over terrorism and Iran vowing retaliation. The SCO's call for a multipolar world order has never felt more urgent.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan attended the 25th meeting of the Council of Heads of State of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The summit brought together heads of state and government from across Eurasia. On the sidelines, the Turkish leader met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Discussions focused on strengthening bilateral relations, enhancing cooperation in trade, energy, and security, as well as addressing pressing international challenges. The Turkish president emphasized Turkey's commitment to dialogue and multilateral diplomacy, highlighting the importance of regional stability in an era of shifting global dynamics. With Turkey holding the status of dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Erdoğan's participation underscored Ankara's pursuit of deeper engagement with Asian powers. His meetings also signaled a continued effort to balance relations between East and West, while seeking opportunities to expand Turkey's role in regional initiatives. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit concluded with calls for greater cooperation in tackling global crises, from economic instability to security threats. The Turkish president's presence and bilateral talks were viewed as part of Ankara's broader strategy to diversify partnerships and reinforce Turkey's diplomatic outreach.
Welcome back to the program. Anews editor Mustafa Kojakanar, welcome to the program.
Good morning, everyone.
Mustafa, let's start with the SEO summit in China. What are the key objectives here, Mustafa? Because many world leaders are here. President Putin is here. President Erdoğan is attending. The leaders of India and Pakistan are also there. So obviously it's a summit filled with discussions and leadership. But tell me firstly, Mustafa, what's on the agenda for this year's summit?
Eurasian leaders are currently gathering in China as the global geopolitical dynamics are shifting rapidly, and Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed his Turkish counterpart, President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Russian leader Vladimir Putin, and other Eurasian leaders in China. And right now, the Eurasian leaders are exchanging views of the latest developments about regional peace and global stability. As you know, Shanghai Cooperation Organization is proposing an alternative to the Western world order, and Chinese President Xi Jinping hailed the role of Shanghai Cooperation Organization in world politics. He yesterday called for further cooperation among Eurasian countries to represent the global South. And as you know, right now there are many international issues posing a huge threat to regional and global peace and stability. And many leaders are reiterating their country's determination to contribute to international peace and security. We know that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting China after 7 years, and it is clearly showing the rift between United States and India. We know that U.S. President Donald Trump initiated trade wars against many countries in the world, and India is one of these countries. And I think that United States' latest steps over tariffs issue is pushing India to strengthen its bilateral ties with China, because we know that India and China have been experiencing ups and downs in their bilateral or multilateral relationships in recent years. But right now, Modi is visiting China to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and they pledge to deepen their bilateral cooperation with the aim of addressing security challenges. They vow to strengthen their cooperation to encounter United States efforts to increase tariffs against both nations. I think that latest Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit will yield positive results in terms of discussing what can be done to encounter Western world order in the world politics. I think that many leaders will vow to strengthen their cooperation with the aim of addressing regional and international security issues.
Mustafa, Turkish President Erdoğan, a while ago we were seeing some images from China. He met his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in China. Their delegations were there as well. Now, we'll obviously get to know what both of these sides have discussed in the next few hours. But, Mustafa, how important is Turkey's presence at the SCO in China this year? And, how can Turkey benefit from deeply engaging with this organization?
Umar, we know that Turkey is a dialogue partner for Shanghai Cooperation Organization since 2012, and we know that as the easternmost of West and westernmost of East country, Turkey is trying to balance its relationships with West and East. We know that Turkey is enjoying close relationships with its Western allies within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but it doesn't mean that Turkey cannot improve its bilateral relationships in the Eurasian countries. And within this context, today Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan is participating in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in China. As you mentioned yesterday, Erdoğan met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, and both the Turkish and Chinese delegations praised the bilateral cooperation between Ankara and Beijing to address the security challenges in the wider Eurasia region. And today, Erdoğan also met with other leaders on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. We know that President Erdoğan has recently met with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Erdoğan and Putin, I think, are set to exchange views on the bilateral ties between Ankara and Moscow, as well as exchanging views on the latest regional and global security developments. As you know, conflicts are raging on in the Eastern Europe between Ukrainian and Russian military forces. And since the very beginning of the crisis, Turkey has been always advocating for dialogue and diplomacy to end the war between Ukraine and Russia. Yes, Turkey always reiterated its ironclad support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and political sovereignty, but Turkey didn't join Western sanction campaigns against Russia. It is clearly showing that Turkey is pursuing a balanced approach to the Ukraine-Russia conflicts. Turkish decision makers claim that all warring sides should sit at the same negotiating table to discuss the possible steps to end the war between Ukraine and Russia. As you know, Turkish decision makers have been trying to bring together Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan is also inviting his American counterpart Donald Trump to participate in the peace talks, possible peace talks between Putin and Zelensky. I think that right now Turkish and Russian delegations are exchanging views on the possible steps to mediate or facilitate diplomatic talks between two warring sides in the Eastern Europe. As you know, Istanbul hosted several rounds of peace negotiations between two warring sides with the aim of contributing to confidence-building measures between two important powers in the region. I think that Erdogan's latest meeting with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping will contribute to peace and stability in the wider Eurasia region.
Mustafa, how important is Putin's visit? Because Ever since the war started, we've barely seen Putin visit any other country or hold, meetings with any world leader. Now, since Putin is here, he's in China, Russia and China. We've seen their ties historically, even in the present day, even after the war, both of them have secured their ties. Now, how important is his visit? What message has he brought to China?
Mar, right now we know that there is international arrest warrant for Putin over Russia's so-called war crimes in Ukraine, and that is the reason why Putin is hesitating to pay an official visit to other countries. But in August, we know that U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed Putin to Alaska, and Putin returned to international and Western global stage. And right now he is visiting China to participate in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I think that Putin is enjoying close relationships with Chinese President Xi Jinping. As you know, China is calling for peace and dialogue between Ukraine and Russia, but on the other hand, China is sometimes supporting Russia's claims in the world politics, and Russia is using Chinese leverage to encounter the Western pressure in the world politics. And as you know, today Putin is expected to speak at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I think he will explain to the world public opinion why Russia is continuing its military activities in Ukraine. As you know, following his meeting with Trump in Alaska in August, Putin called for the elimination of the root causes of the conflicts in Ukraine. Everyone was expecting immediate cessation or ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia following the talks between Putin and Trump, but we always claim that if the international community wants to see peace and stability between Ukraine and Russia, they are supposed to take both sides' security demands into the consideration. But we know that European nations are hesitating to meet Russia's security demands in the region. They are still discussing NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine's political future. But since the very beginning of the crisis, Russia is strictly against Western military deployments to Ukraine, and it is clearly showing that there is a deadlock right now between Russia and Western countries. And right now, Putin is trying to strengthen Russia's bilateral or multilateral cooperation with the Eurasian countries to promote an alternative to Western world order. I think that cooperation and collaboration among Eurasian countries will be helpful for Russia to meet its security demands in the world politics.
Mustafa, thanks for that update.
You're welcome.
China and India pledged to expand trade and investment ties as Prime Minister Narendra Modi met President Xi Jinping in Tianjin, marking Modi's first visit to China in 7 years amid rising global economic pressures.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi told Chinese President Xi Jinping on Sunday that New Delhi is committed to improving ties with Beijing. His comment came as the pair discussed expanding trade and investment ties against the backdrop of U.S. tariffs. Modi is in China for the first time in 7 years. He's there to attend a 2-day summit of the security-focused Shanghai Cooperation Organization, along with Russian President Vladimir Putin and other leaders from Central, South and Southeast Asia and the Middle East in a show of Global South solidarity. We are committed to taking our relations forward on the basis of mutual trust, respect and sensitivity, Modi said at the bilateral talks on the sidelines of the summit. His meeting with Xi in Tianjin took place 5 days after the Trump administration imposed punishing 50% tariffs on Indian goods, citing New Delhi's purchases of Russian oil. It's a move analysts say has pushed the pair to align against Western pressures. It is the right choice for the two sides to be friends who have good neighborly and amicable ties, partners who enable each other's success, Xi said at the meeting. Modi also spoke of positive developments to the Himalayan border dispute, saying an atmosphere of peace and stability has been created. It's the site of a prolonged military standoff after deadly troop clashes in 2020, which froze most areas of cooperation between the nuclear-armed strategic rivals. The Indian leader said direct flights between the two nations, which have been suspended since 2020, are being resumed, although he did not provide a time frame.
Welcome back to the program. Now let's take a look at the front page of Daily Sabah. So we were just talking about President Erdoğan's visit to China. Now here's a picture with the First Lady, Emine Erdoğan. Turkey's message is clear, it's simple. Turkey brings Gaza justice agenda to SCO. It's not a message that Erdoğan has only taken to the SCO, but it's a message that he has been talking about wherever he goes at every international forum and event. Now, Mustafa, we were talking about how Turkey is in attendance. Turkey is also meeting leaders from Pakistan, India. Yesterday we saw the handshake between Erdoğan and Modi as well. Today he met Putin. Yesterday he met Xi Jinping. Now, Mustafa, tell me, what are the benefits for Turkey when Turkey attends this summit when it comes to economic cooperation and its own foreign policy?
As we already mentioned, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, he's meeting with Eurasian leaders on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in China. And we know that Turkey is striving to enhancing its already ties with the Western countries, but it is also establishing new cooperation and relationships with countries located in the eastern part of the world. And as you know, Turkey has been pursuing Asia initiative to strengthen its bilateral or multilateral cooperation with the countries in wider Eurasia region. And that is the reason why right now Erdoğan is visiting China to strengthen Turkey's bilateral ties with the member countries. As you know, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan also met with Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, Azerbaijani leader Ilham Aliyev, and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. And it is evident that Turkey is determined right now to strengthen its cooperation with the countries located in the Eurasia region. And I think that Turkey's rising ties and strengthening ties with these countries are clearly contributing to peace and stability in the region. Everyone right now is praising Turkey's diplomatic efforts to contribute to international peace and security. As you know, Turkey has been also calling for a reform process within the United Nations Security Council. And many countries in Global South and Eurasia are supporting Turkey's reform calls for the United Nations Security Council. On the other hand, right now, Turkish decision makers, I think, are bringing Gaza and international justice to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. As you know, since the very beginning of the crisis in the occupied Palestinian territory, Gaza Strip, Turkey has been trying to increase international awareness about the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people living in the occupied Gaza and West Bank. And Turkey's diplomatic efforts, I think, are yielding positive results in terms of recognition of the Palestinian statehood. As you know, this month there will be United Nations General Assembly in New York, and many countries, France in particular, are set to recognize the Palestinian statehood. I think that it will be helpful for international community to uphold the Palestinian rights. I think that Turkey's rising geopolitical influence, both in West and East, will be helpful for ensuring international peace and stability.
Mustafa, since you've mentioned the UN General Assembly this month, do you think that the message that they're going to push over there, is it only going to be a symbolic message, or do you think that they're actually, pushing for the Palestinian cause?
Umar, I think the recognition decision will be both symbolic and concrete, because we know that Israel is being diplomatically isolated from the international community right now, and international criticism is mounting on Israel over the dire humanitarian conditions in the occupied Palestinian territories. Yes, some countries are set to recognize the Palestinian statehood, but on the other hand, we know that dozens of countries have already recognized the Palestinian statehood. But on the ground, I think if we want to stop Israel's military activities, I think we have to see some concrete steps from the international community, Western countries in particular. As you know, Turkey has been always calling for arms embargo and economic sanctions on Israel. Turkey has already cut its trade activities with Israel, and Turkey is pushing for regional cooperation to deal with the security challenges posed by the Israeli security forces. I think that Western countries will be supposed to take concrete steps if they want to bring long-term peace and stability to the Middle East. Otherwise, I think that Israel will continue to turn a blind eye to international criticism over the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip.
Mustafa, thanks for those updates from Delhi Sabah.
You're welcome.
Now let's take a look at this news report and we'll be right back.
Palestinians mourned the death of loved ones after Israeli forces pounded the suburbs of Gaza City overnight into Sunday. Attacks came from the air and from the ground, destroying homes and driving more families out of the area. Local health authorities said dozens of people were killed, including some who tried to get food near an aid site in the central Gaza Strip, and more in a house in Gaza City. The Israeli military said it was not aware of casualties near aid distribution points in central Gaza. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his security cabinet met to discuss the next stages of a plan to seize Gaza City. Netanyahu said that Israeli forces had targeted Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson of Hamas's armed wing, a well-known figure to both Palestinians and Israelis alike. In a post on X, Defense Minister Israel Katz said Abu Ubaidah was killed in Saturday's strike. There was no immediate comment from Hamas. A full-scale Israeli offensive is not expected to start for weeks. Israel says it wants to evacuate the civilian population before moving more ground forces in. Among those gathered near the city's Al-Shifa hospital, Etaf Abu al-Jabin vowed to stay put.
We have 4 martyrs in our family. They struck our tent while we were sleeping at night. We had done nothing wrong. We don't know what they want from us.
The Israeli military has gradually stepped up its operations around Gaza City over the past 3 weeks. On Friday, it ended temporary pauses of military action in the area that had allowed for aid deliveries, designating it as a dangerous combat zone.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from the Pakistani capital is political analyst Javed Rana. Javed, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Umar.
Javed, over the past few days, we have seen Israel brutally attacking Yemen. They attacked the capital, Sana'a, killed the Houthi PM. Then Abu Ubaidah, Israeli government says that Abu Ubaidah, who is the spokesman for Hamas in Gaza, has also been killed. How are you looking at the developments from the last few days, Javed?
I think what Israel has been doing, it would be broadly perceived yet another attempt to basically target the leadership. And in Israel, somehow or the other, mistakenly believe that by eliminating the leadership of a particular organization, of a particular country, they can bring an end to the resistance. That is the most unlikely scenario to happen. What Israel doesn't understand that it has been dealing with the ideological countries, with ideological organizations, and they are not going to die down by eliminating their top leadership. That was the formula that Israel has been applying in Lebanon over the period of time. Same has been the case in Gaza. Same has we have now seen in the latest attack. The Yemeni Prime Minister has been assassinated. So again, the bigger question that you have rightly raised, will that have any reasonable impact on the overall regional scenario? I don't think so. The Houthis have vowed to continue their attacks, to continue their resistance against the apartheid Israel. I think that is the most likely to continue to happen. So by eliminating these leadership would not have any major impact. And in a similar fashion, the Abu Ubaidah, who's a well-known spokesperson of Hamas, I think by assassinating him, I don't think it will have any impact on the communication network of Hamas and other jihadi groups who've been fighting fearlessly against the apartheid structure in the occupied Palestinian territories. Again, by killing the leadership, we have seen, how many leaders Israel has killed in Gaza. We are forgetting even the name of the peoples. But what has been the net result? The resistance continues, though there has been not as frequent attacks inside Israel from Gaza, but still the resistance is there. Despite the last 2 years, Israel has not been able to basically contain the resistance from all these jihadi groups. That shows that still these militant organizations, these resistant groups, they believe that they are under illegal occupation and resisting them is something obligatory upon them. Then we have to also understand that they all follow Islam, and Islam does teach them that, that whenever they are under attack, resisting is a legitimate tool. And then for them, all these militants, all these jihadi groups, on all these resistant groups, the highest point in their life is what they call as seeking martyrdom. So I think by assassinating any leader of these groups, and including the Prime Minister of Yemen, I don't think this resistance would come to an end.
Javed, of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit is also underway in China. Before it was known as the Shanghai Five, but today when we look at this group, it has, dialogue partners, observer members, and permanent members as well. How will the crisis in the occupied Gaza Strip impact this summit? What sort of a message do you think leaders should bring forward?
Well, I think the joint communique has yet to be released. But what we have heard from so far from the leaders of the SCO, that does indicate that this issue was discussed. And more particularly, we have to focus on Türkiye, President Tayyip Erdoğan and Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. And they both have highlighted the Israel's aggression, Israel's genocide in Gaza. Turkey's particular focus has been particularly to basically highlight this crisis and also bracket it on what is happening in Ukraine, and to let the world know that this is also a bigger crisis, a far bigger crisis than that of the Ukraine. But again, the bigger picture is that the SCO's focus somehow or the other is not the Gaza. Their focus is the high tariff by the US. And that is why most of these countries have been basically collaborating. They are trying to project themselves to send a message to the West with particular focus to the US that if these high tariff would lead to another bloc in the world, and which may not be very much to the liking of the West. But again, we have to also understand that this is a kind of a forum where the regional issues have always been discussed, but again, always Russia, we have to see Russia is a big country, China is a big country, they do dictate their agenda. And Russia's agenda is obviously to basically send message to the US, to the European Union, that it has the backing of so many countries, and it can withstand it's a war in the Ukraine. China is basically using this forum to send message to the Americans that it is a parallel superpower now, and more particularly when it comes to the trade, that it have the alternative routes, and the 13% hit that China has been facing from after the high tariff imposed by the US, I think that would not have any impact. That is a message that China is trying to send. But again, we have to understand that, yes, that the countries like Pakistan and Turkey, they have highlighted the Gaza genocide, but I don't expect that there will be any meaningful impact on the international stage at this particular point of time.
Javed, tell me about Pakistan's role at this summit, because we know it has to face rivals from India, then it has held negotiations with Russia as well, and China has always been a key ally for the Pakistanis. How are you looking at Pakistan's role at the summit that's underway in China right now?
I think Pakistan did not name India, but Pakistan did highlight its bilateral disputes with India. And I think that is extremely important because unless these countries resolve their regional disputes, I don't think SCO summit or this particular forum would be able to have any meaningful impact on the world stage. Now, Pakistan did point out that Indus Water Treaty, which is a water treaty brokered by World Bank in 1960s, that was unilaterally suspended by India. And under its provision, there is no provision, in fact, under which India could have done so. And Pakistan highlighted that particular issue, and also more particularly in the recent flood that we have seen, as many as 800 to 900 people have died from June till now in the floods. And one of the leading reasons behind this flood is India. India released water, the flood water, all of a sudden, as a result of which now there is a large-scale floods in Pakistan's biggest province of Punjab, and more floods are feared to happen. And I think Pakistan did highlight that point. And again, bigger issue that I already pointed out, it would not have any impact. India is at this particular point of time is essentially trying to send message to USA that it is going to cozy up with Russia, it is going to cozy up with China if these 50% tariff that USA has imposed on India are not withdrawn. India seems to be not showing much concern of what Pakistan has been highlighting, because India has been pursuing a very negative policy, and that is why we have seen that it has been isolated regionally now. All the regional countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, they no longer have that kind of a thick relation with India as it used to be. And the part of the reason is that India is considered itself that it is a regional superpower, which is a complete nonsense. It is not a superpower. We have seen that in this year's May war with India, Pakistan has beaten up India. And all these regional countries are quite happy. So I think the bigger problem for Pakistan is essentially to resolve these regional disputes. But India is the biggest hurdle. It has straight away refused to implement UN Security Council resolutions to hold plebiscite in disputed Kashmir region. That is at the core of the problem.
Javed, staying on the topic of India, now India is in a very distressing situation because it has issues with Pakistan. You were just telling us about the floods. Then earlier this year, we saw the skirmishes, cross-border so-called operations. And then there's China as well, border clashes with the Chinese, that has been happening. And then recently, Trump imposed tariffs on India, saying that it's importing a lot of oil and gas from Russia. Now, do you think by the time this summit ends, India will have more positive outcomes, or it's just going to be a hopeless case for the Modi government?
I think right now, India is confused. It doesn't know to which direction it needs to lead the world and lead the region more particularly. The reason is that it has been beaten up by Pakistan militarily. Excuse me. And then it was a kind of situation where it picked up a fight with USA. And the USA was not supporting India as India was expecting. The reason was that India was expecting that since India is a part of a regional alliance with the USA, with Australia, with the other Southeastern countries in Southeast Asia, to counter China, and the USA would come to a help, at least diplomatically. But I think Donald Trump's unexpected positive posturing, the diplomatic posturing towards Pakistan, it looks like, has alienated India from the kind of the alliance it used to have with the USA. Now, after being beaten up by Pakistan in the war, which was supported by China, in terms of providing all kind of intelligence, in terms of providing all kind of weaponaries, now India basically, in this particular conference, in the SU summit, in the silent meetings with the Chinese leaders, has been projecting itself that India has an option to thicken its relation with Russia and somehow the other manage its relation with China if the high tariff on trade continues by the US. Again, this is a kind of situation where India has not sent a very clear message to which direction it wants to lead itself. This is a problematic area, and that is the reason that now we are witnessing more and more what appears to be confusing statements coming from New Delhi. It doesn't know to which direction it wants to lead India in years to come, because Donald Trump has left India in a lurch, and it has a policy crisis, and it has disputes with China, a border dispute with China. I mean, at least once there are two states of India upon which China has a claim, and in one of the states which borders with China, India has allowed Israel's intelligence network to operate there. Even Indians cannot go there. So China sees India with a sense of suspicion. And then China sees India a country which is more aligned with the USA, which is more aligned with the Israel. And what kind of Israel's geostrategic objectives are in the region? We know partly it is a Pakistan, but at the same time, now also in Beijing, there is a lingering concern that why Israel's intelligence network is there in a very comprehensive manner. They have their infrastructure, they have their intelligence network, they have the villages after the villages, and they have settled there. And I think in that context, China perceives that India, along with Israel, with the U.S. deep establishment, they are trying to destabilize China, and they have a plan in place. And I don't think it will be easier for China to accept India's so-called diplomatic posturing at a time. China would like to have more trade with India, but I think as long as the border disputes with China are not settled, I don't think there would be a genuine move towards resolving regional issues.
Javed Rana, thank you so much for that analysis. It was a pleasure having you on the program. Anews editor Mustafa Kojakanar, thank you for being with us in the studios.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.